Hey guys! Do you find that when you leave a scary movie that ghost or monster tends to follow you around a little bit? Or do you find that scary movies either increase or decrease your stress and anxiety? Well, today we're going to talk about how anxiety and stress are intertwined with scary movies, plus my top 10 list of calming movies. That way we can all enjoy the experience a little bit better. So let's get to it. Hey guys, it's Vanessa V. Welcome to my channel where we discuss reigning over your life, conquering what's holding you back, and living life in victory each day using simplified strategies that work for you. And in case you're not familiar with me, I'm an actress and speaker. I host workshops, and I'm also living with post-traumatic stress disorder. I am not a healthcare professional or a mental health care professional, but what I am is an expert in my own situation and what works for me. And my hope is that by sharing with you all that I share today and on this channel, it'll help you just like it's helped me and so many others. Whew. Okay, so if you've been watching along for the past month or so, you'll probably notice that a lot of these segments have been kind of heavy subjects and heavy topics. They're important to talk about, but I really wanted to discuss just something more fun. And so I figured, why not, since if you're watching this real time, it is the first week in October, which means that fall is here, Halloween is coming up, and there might be a lot of scary movies that you want to watch, or you're interested in watching, or maybe you're a little afraid to watch them, or whatever. We're gonna get to that today. If you're watching this at some other time in the year, not to worry, because this pertains to any time of the year. Just channel that fall coziness and those spiced donuts. You know I love donuts. You know, the crunchy leaves and the spiced lattes and the cozy sweaters, and the fall is coming and it's the start of the holidays, and oh my gosh, I just love it. I love it. Okay, so right before we get started, I just want to invite you to meet Buster the rat. I used to own pet rats. They are amazing. Honestly, if you are looking for a pet to have, you can rescue them at local shelters. They're amazing. And I'm pretty sure they're smarter than dogs, if not as smart as dogs. I trained mine. He came when called. We did a movie with him. He was amazing. So anyway, oh, and I also have this BOO pillow right here. It's nice and velvety and has little spots of fuzz on it, but that's okay. And we also have this gray fuzzy blanket, my ruffle black pillow, and all that jazz. Oh, and a pumpkin. So I'm all Halloweened out and ready for scary movie time. Okay, so like I said at the beginning of the video, sometimes when we go to see movies, the scary effects can sort of linger with us for a few days. So I want to talk about why that is. And also, some of you out there, like I said, may actually find that scary movies calm you down. So we're going to talk about that. If any of those things are you, feel free to comment below with the word BOO with a ton of exclamation points. And lastly, we are going to address some calming scary movies. And we'll get to what I define those as well as what my suggestions are. So let's talk about it. Okay, so as you know on this channel, we tend to talk about the brain a lot. And that is because it is the control center. So it's basically the reason behind a lot of the negative things we experience, but it can also be the source of a lot of the solutions. So it may seem obvious that the brain has to do with our anxiety with scary movies, whether it increases or decreases our anxiety. But that's actually just it. It's the how and the why that I think is so interesting and has actually helped me to not only use scary movies to my advantage, but to also enjoy the overall experience even more. Because once we understand all of that, we actually have a lot more power over the situation. Okay, so let's talk about that. And you know what, actually, I'm gonna remove this. It's probably gonna leave a really big red mark on my face. No, not too bad actually, but it did flatten out my hair. All right, so we'll pop that there and I'll just shake it out. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about is the first thing that I sort of mentioned, which is when we see a scary movie, those effects, those scary effects tend to last with us. So if we go to the movie theater and we see a movie about a ghost or something. When we go home, we tend to sort of feel as though that ghost is amongst us, or we feel a little bit more on edge or on high alert, right? If that's not you, cool. That was definitely me growing up. I mean, Beetlejuice definitely hung outside my door at night, like all the time. I knew he was there. He never came in, but I knew he was there, right? So in previous videos like The Brain Explained, we talk a lot about how the brain reacts in a fight, flight, or freeze response. It's always looking for danger, red flags. It's always learning things about our environment to keep us safe, right? So our brain's purpose is survival. So unfortunately, the subconscious brain, and fortunately, I guess it's not all bad. But in this situation, when we see a scary movie, our brain doesn't realize, that subconscious part does not realize that it's not actually happening to us. So it's getting these signals of danger and unsafety in our environment. And so we are going to react in a fight, flight, or freeze way. And because that part of our brain doesn't realize that A, what we're watching is fictional, but B, we have left the theater and now we are on our way home, or the movie has ended, that is over with. If that part of the brain doesn't get that signal, then it can just assume that that danger is still present even though we are moving into different environments. So what our brain is actually doing is keeping us on high alert for that monster or that ghost that we saw in that movie, because it doesn't realize that that danger is over unless we sort of help it do that. So it makes sense that that would sort of linger with us, that high alert or on edge feeling or fear. It makes sense that that would sort of linger with us because our brain is actually waiting for it to pop out again, because it did the other night. There was an hour and a half of this happening. Why wouldn't it happen again, sort of thing. This totally happens to my husband, Nick, when it comes to the movie The Conjuring. If I do this, he will not sleep. He will just stay up all night and then go into work. I'm serious. So this actually was really important for me to sort of know. It sort of was an aha moment for me because it did two things for me. One, it really hit home just how strong our subconscious can be and how much it can bleed into our sort of rational thinking, right? Because we know that the movie is over, but that subconscious brain doesn't know that. And so it sort of clouds that rational thinking, and how interesting and kind of a little scary it can be. It actually helps me when I'm in situations that are feeling bigger than what they are. I think we talked about in the stress, worry, and anxiety video. I will link that below. But where things that are actually small appear larger and scarier than what they actually are. So learning this actually helped me do that. So even though it's not scary movie related, if I'm feeling a lot of negative emotions and scary thoughts and etc., I can go, okay, I know that this is what happens in a scary movie. Is this what's happening right now because something else in my environment or a situation or a person has triggered something that makes my subconscious brain go, whoa, this is a big deal. Be scared, be worried, be overwhelmed, obsess, etc., even though it's actually not that big. Does that make sense? Oh, and the last thing that it did was it also helped me sort of guard things that I watch. So I'm not saying to not watch certain things, even though it's probably a good idea to sort of weed out certain things that we watch. But really it's just preparing myself and going, I know that what I'm about to watch, my brain is going to think that that's happening to me. So do I really want to watch that? And if so, what are things that I can do to sort of help my brain get through that and not absorb it as much? And so all of that actually does this really cool thing. It helps us practice walking through our stress and anxiety. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this channel is preparing ahead of time, deciding whether or not something is worth our time to have stress and anxiety about, or do we face it or avoid it or whatever. And then once we're in that situation, how do we handle that? And so actually one of the benefits of watching scary movies, if you're comfortable with that movie, is that it can actually give you a chance to safely practice stress and anxiety management before, during, and after. And the suggestion that I would have mainly for that is using the stress hacks that we work on here and using the strategies that we talk about on this channel, because all of those things can definitely apply to scary movies. The next thing that I mentioned earlier was how scary movies can actually decrease our stress and anxiety. If you've never felt that, this might be of interest to you. And if you've felt that, you might be interested also, because it kind of doesn't make sense when you think about it. But there have been studies and there's research out there that actually shows that this actually can happen. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details just for the purposes of saving time, but I will link those links below in case you're interested in learning more. But basically what's going on is there's a lot of chemical reactions going on because of the brain in that fight, flight, or freeze response. And in some cases, you can actually feel really good, especially at the end of a movie, because you've just survived a very stressful situation. You've just averted danger. And so what can happen is after that situation is over with, you actually get a boost of all of these chemicals that actually help you to feel really good. Now, I'm also going to expand on that a little bit and just say that there are other reasons, right? So control. When we watch scary movies, we tend to feel more in control. And we do have control over it. We can either leave the theater, we can shut our eyes, we can press pause, we can fast forward, etc. So there's a control aspect to it where we're dealing with extremely stressful situations, but we have control. And again, with that perspective that I mentioned a few minutes ago, scary movies can almost give us a perspective. So if we're feeling extra stressful and we watch something scary, sometimes it can actually help us think, you know what, my situation is not that bad, not compared to that movie. And I did read at one point, someone said that movies make anxiety and stress fun. I can understand that. I mean, I suppose it's true. I never really think of it that way, but I suppose for some, it can be experiencing stress and anxiety in a more fun way, because you know, usually when we experience stress and anxiety, it's not fun. It doesn't feel fun. But movies are short. They can be entertaining. We do have that control. And we also have those hacks that I talked about that allow us to sort of practice our stress and anxiety management while we're doing something that's entertaining. We're usually with other people, and it feels safer, the stakes are much lower, etc., and all that stuff. So all in all, there can be positive reasons to like scary movies, right? It gives us a sense of control, like I just said. The good guy usually wins, so that's a huge plus. And it's fictional, it's escapism, right? But I know that there's a lot of us out there who don't really like scary movies, or you want to like scary movies, but they're just too scary, right? They're too triggering and too overly stimulating, which I totally understand. And so that's the reason for this next and final part. My top 10 list of calming scary movies. What's it called? Top 10 list of calming scary movies. Because sometimes you want to watch a scary movie and not feel worse afterwards. Okay. Now, scary movies actually don't tend to scare me very much, but what they do tend to do is cause me to have a lot of tension, right? A lot of squeezing. So how I sort of categorize calming scary movies is the pace. Now, this can be considered, I think if you've heard the term before, slow burn, that might be what these films are considered. But to me, there's still sort of a different category of slow burn movies, because what I'm really looking for is something that is very slow paced. Not boring at all, but sort of the rhythm is just very slow and calm and still. So there's things happening, but it's not like boom, 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 boom. And there's not a jump scare all the time. And also, I haven't seen all of these movies like recently. I would not do that to myself. But they're all movies that I have seen. And so what I'm going to be doing, and what I did do when I compiled the list, was from my memory, what I recall that movie being to me in terms of calming. But it can always be subjective to you, you know, to me, to somebody else. So just take everything that I say with a grain of salt, and hopefully the movies on this list will just give you some inspiring ideas of some movies that you might want to watch leading up to Halloween or any time of the year. Okay, here we go. I'm not going to try and give away too much of the plot here, so I'll just make my comments very short. The first one is The Orphan. This film, I recall being pretty slow, a pretty quiet film, but it's also kind of up. So again, you might want to look into it ahead of time. I was able to watch it, so it's borderline on some things that I find a little triggering, but you know, everyone has different triggers. The next one is The Haunting of Hill House, I think it's called. This, I believe, is episodic, so it's not really a film, but if you watch it all at once, it could be a very long film. But I do recall it was really good. I enjoyed watching it. It is definitely more slow, more quiet, but I do believe it has some jump scares in it. Number 8 on my list is The Conjuring. Now, if you talk to Nick, again, he would not even put this movie on the list, but I found that, again, the rhythm, it's more quiet. There are definite jump scares towards the end, which is why it's still high up on the list for me. Popcorn break. And I'm good. Number 7 is The Witch. Now, this film, I will tell you, is extremely gory. It is very gory. But if you're okay with that, you just need something that's slower, that's not gonna sort of like rev you up as much as other horror movies would. This can be a really great option. Number 6 on my list is The Others, starring Nicole Kidman. I actually really enjoy this movie. I found that the stakes didn't feel very high. It's definitely a little intense. It can be kind of scary, but again, it's slow. It's sort of dark. The lighting is very dark, and it's just a really good story. 5, The Omen. Now, this, I guess with any scary movies, the premise isn't really something that you would find reassuring. But from what I recall of the old version, I think it's in the 70s, the 1970s, but it may also be in the 2006 version as well. But I just remember it being very slow. And because, not that it was boring slow necessarily, but again, with the rhythm and the pacing and everything like that, I did not feel on edge the whole time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not one of my favorites, but again, if you're interested in that kind of movie, it might be for you. 4, The Shining. Now, this is one of those movies, and I'm not trying to give anything away, but this is definitely one of those movies where I enjoy the beginning, and then at a certain point, I'm like, you know what? Never mind, I think I'm good. But you have the sort of landscape shots of the winding road, and there's snow, and it's pretty, and it's quiet, and I don't know, something about the opening of The Shining, the first, I don't know, half, I actually really enjoy. And if you happen to see the documentary of the making of The Shining, you will see just how up the making of that movie was, which isn't calming at all. Maybe don't watch that. Number 3 is called I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House. By the way, I'll link all these movies below to IMDb for you. But this movie is extremely quiet. And now we're getting into the realm of the movies that I know if I watch them, I'm going to feel more grounded, more calm, not necessarily more centered or whatever. I mean, they're still scary movies, but it's not going to sort of keep me feeling revved up the whole time. Very slow, very quiet, but really interesting. 2 is A Quiet Place. I mean, come on, if you saw it in the theaters, you could hear a pin drop, literally. I mean, I don't think, when I saw this movie in theaters last year or the year before, I don't think anyone ate any of their food. Like, even if you shifted a little bit, the entire theater could hear you because the movie is that quiet. It's slow. Now, of course, as with all scary movies, there are parts in it where you're gonna go, ooh, or you don't wanna look. And it can be intense. I'm not saying the movie isn't intense, but again, with that pacing and the slowness, it's definitely a go-to movie for me if I wanna see a scary movie that's not super fast paced. And the last one, it stars Casey Affleck and, oh gosh, what's her name? Rooney Mara, that's right. And you know, I should have probably named all of the people or the directors of the movies. I'm sorry. But anyway, it's fine. But this film I just saw last week. I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was pretty interesting. The trailer looked good, and that movie, it's very good. I would say and suggest to watch it. Remember how we talked about those 5 things? It's like, almost like 1. If any of those numbers meant anything for you to count down, this film matches closely to a 1 for me in the 5 things. So it's a very interesting film, and I would highly suggest it for sure. It was by far, out of this entire list, the most calming movie on this list. Okay, and just a couple honorable mentions. Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window. That's a pretty good one with Jimmy Stewart. For some films that aren't necessarily scary, we have Sleepy Hollow that has some comedy in it. Shaun of the Dead, that also is a bit of a comedy. Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This is Nick's favorite movie, and it is really good. It's pretty funny. And then we also have a little bit of romance with The Twilight. That's right, The Twilight. It is unto itself. I don't know if that makes sense, but it is pretty slow. It has to do with rain, and sort of the lighting is a little bit dark. The music can be sort of spooky and eerie, but pretty. And there's sparkly vampires. I like sparkles. And then finally, just checking out some kids movies. The Goosebumps movies for kids, those kind of actually did freak me out a little bit. But maybe that's because I read them growing up. But anyway, Jack Black's in it, and it's a much lower key, the stakes aren't as high kind of film, where you can still get into the Halloween or scary movie spirit without actually watching super intense films, is basically the point. So all in all, as a quick recap, my few suggestions would be to identify your triggers ahead of time and have someone else look into these movies for you if that's what you need. Watch them with other people. When we watch them alone, we tend to be a little bit more scared. And use the hacks and tips and tricks that we talk about on this channel to help get yourself into more rational thinking before, during, and after. So when you're about to see a scary movie, literally set yourself up and acknowledge the fact that that's something that you're gonna do. Maybe plan ahead different hacks that you wanna try while you're watching the scary movie. During it, you know, checking in with your surroundings and all that stuff. And then afterwards, also doing some calming techniques and reminding yourself that you are in fact safe. And anything that you feel moving forward from that movie is your brain, your subconscious brain, trying to protect you from something that's not there. So there you have it, you guys. I hope that this list helped inspire you and helped you feel more comfortable and confident watching scary movies and perhaps dealing with your stress and anxiety moving forward using scary movies. Feel free to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Like or dislike this video. It's really cool either way. I appreciate your feedback. Feel free to follow me on social media. I would love to connect with you. Those links are below. And just remember that fear can sometimes be false evidence appearing real. And I'll see you next time. Bye! Boo!